it takes a lot of courage to show up in a story that doesn't look like what you wanted it
Yes.
to.
When you're in the dark, it's really easy to see the points of light. And I think that's the direction we need to go.
Highly sensitive friends since 2018, we've been sharing our journeys together.
And now we're bringing you along for the ride,
Welcome to Highly Sensitive Friends Talking,
where we chat about all things HSP, from daily life scenarios
to exploring spirituality, personal growth.
and all the aha moments in between.
So grab a cozy drink and settle in.
Because this is your space to feel seen, heard, and inspired. Let's spend some time together.
Welcome, everyone, to this next episode of our podcast. We have decided to talk about something that we hope will be very helpful to our listeners right now, which is kind of the topic of how to navigate scenarios and situations in life that you feel like are out of your control, or when you feel hopeless, or maybe even defeated, or all these types of emotions that come up during situations like things that are relevant going on in the world at the moment. Definitely both have been on our minds the past couple of days. This
Yes.
topic.
Yes. Yes, it's the November 7th as we're recording this podcast, and it's really soon after election in the
Yeah.
United States, to be honest, because I'm 7 hours ahead of you guys. And the night of the election night, I woke up twice in the middle of the night, and I just had this really strange feeling. Then the next morning,
Yeah.
I woke up and it felt like a fever dream.
Yeah. You're like, is this real?
Yes.
Should I pinch myself?
I felt like I woke up in the wrong timeline, but it just was really heavy energy. I can imagine that you must have felt that times 10 because you live in the United States.
It's interesting to me when we chat because it feels like you're so aware of everything too, even being physically removed from my country, but it does feel like it's world news.
Yes, it
It's,
is.
yeah, there's a lot of themes that I think are triggering for people. It's not just about the specific candidates, but just the things that are kind of coming up and different debates about different rights and things. And I mean, as I was even explaining to my family member about the election, sorry, I have something in my eye. Once you cast your vote, that's it. That's all you can really do. And one of the things that kind of was coming up for me recently, thinking about all this, is why are we voting a specific person into office and not
Yes.
voting on the actual issues at hand? Because you might not always agree with everything that one candidate believes, and so
Yeah.
it can feel frustrating to feel like you've cast your vote and maybe that's all you can do. But I think that what we want to talk about is there are other things you can do for yourself or for the world, your country, your community. I think that the hardest part about feeling hopeless or feeling despair or feeling like there's things out of your control is that you feel like you've lost your power. You don't feel empowered, right?
Yes, I think so too. It
Yeah,
just feels too big. And
right.
when it feels so big, you just feel powerless.
Right. I actually think that a lot of what I would contribute to how to encourage people to move forward is things that help them feel empowered. But I think
Yes.
actually before even I wrote a little bit of notes that just kind of came into my head when we were brainstorming about this topic. And I wrote some things down that I thought, oh, this would be super helpful. But then I actually also realized that before you do anything, whether this is the election, whether this is, you didn't get the job that you wanted to get, or a relationship fell apart and it wasn't going to end up the way that you thought it would, any of these types of different scenarios, you can end up feeling hopeless, right? And I think the
Yes,
first
true.
thing that you need to do, really, in any scenario, in my opinion, is grieve. Let yourself
Yes.
feel whatever you're feeling, because I've definitely learned as a coach and as a friend and as a partner and all of these different roles that I play in my life that you can't really suggest new ideas or expect someone to move forward until you've sat with them and validated how they're actually feeling in that moment. And I think sometimes we rush that in ourselves where we're like, I gotta move forward. I gotta figure out, how do I move on? How do I function? How do I get through the day? And it's like, well, hold on. Before
Hold
you do
on,
any of
just
that
check
stuff,
in.
yeah, and it's like, I think that one of the most powerful things I've heard about things are out of your control, or you're feeling powerless, or that something didn't pan out the way that you thought it would, it takes a lot of courage to show up in a story that doesn't look like what you wanted it to,
Yes.
right? There's some sort of quote out there about that. And I think
I
that,
love that.
yeah, it's like, it does. It takes a lot of strength and courage to keep showing up in a reality that doesn't look like the way you planned or envisioned for yourself. And so I think along these lines of processing what's going on right now, I'm feeling like it's out of your control. I think the first thing is to just grieve the story that you wanted to happen that didn't. That's first step number one, in my opinion.
I agree. I think a lot of highly sensitive people are dealing with this anyways, because we are very sensitive souls born into a very harsh and fast and loud world. So we kind of deal with this every day anyways. And when then this kind of extra noise gets added to it, it just feels like too much at some point, you know?
I completely agree with and resonate with what you just said. But I also think you and I are big believers in that things happen for a reason and that the universe has a bigger plan and all of these things. And I think that while a lot of these current events are very challenging for us as sensitive people because we feel it all, you know, I'm guilty or whatever of tuning out the news and just putting blinders on because it's a lot sometimes. But I also think that sensitive people, there's a unique opportunity now where I think there's more awareness around this trait to the point where people like us are trying to support sensitive people, right? So that they can follow their dreams and kind of stand in their power and feel more safe to feel seen and express themselves. So I think this is kind of a wake-up call of if you really care about these issues, you know, you can do things. And I think there are things that sensitive people can do.
True.
That they can move things forward and contribute to the causes we care about and speak up, you know, and use our voices.
Yeah, I think so too. It's really important to use our voices and in whatever way you can, whether that is on your own social media channels, whether it is in a conversation with a friend or with a coworker. I think there's so many ways to show the beautiful side of your trait right now when the world needs it the most.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I think that a big heavy burden that sometimes I think sensitive people feel is that like caring so much that it can feel like they almost wish you wouldn't care so much because it feels so heavy. But at the same time, if you think about what type of change or action or momentum or whatever would need to happen for things to shift, the people that care deeply are the ones that are going to want to take action. There's actually probably somewhere in Dr. Elaine Aron's books or maybe somewhere I read about this highly sensitive brain. But there's actually a study done, and I'm sorry if I'm going to butcher the details, but it's something along the lines of watching the activity going on in a highly sensitive person's brain when they're looking at photos of people's expressions. And they showed higher activity in their brain watching people have strong expressions on their faces. And then if it was someone that they knew, like if it was a picture of their friend or their spouse, there was more activity in the brain that suggested they wanted to act, that they wanted to do something. Right. So I think that it's kind of the two sides of the coin of sensitivity where it is a lot to feel things and care so much about these things. But then at the same time, it's those types of people that are going to be the ones to push the needle forward. Right. And so how do we utilize the fact that we care so much and channel that into something that feels empowering rather than powerless? Right.
I agree. I agree. You know, it's really hard to turn that energy around because, to be honest, just looking at the current state of the world, I feel like a deep sense of grief, like you talked about, just a real disappointment in all the leaders of our world, because it's not just about the election that has happened just now, but also with regards to the climate. And I don't know if you saw, but in Spain, there have been like a lot of really bad floodings, as well as, of course, with the hurricane in Florida.
I was going to say, there's so many hurricane, bizarre flooding things happening here too. Yeah.
Yeah. A few years ago, I believe also in Pakistan. So it's just a lot of climate anxiety as well that a lot of us people are dealing with. It's just this big disappointment, almost not only in our leaders, but also in older generations for not taking care of our planet and making sure that we inherit a healthy planet and that we can continue the legacy. You know, it feels like we really have to clean up a mess. It's almost hard.
It makes me think of different coaching scenarios and even with myself and friends and family of the difference between short-term benefit and long-term benefit. And I feel like what you're talking about is a very clear example of, oh, let's just do the easy thing now to make money or to make progress or whatever. And it's like, we think about long-term. Like I always say, do the hard thing now so that later is better, later is easier. You know, the other thing I was going to mention, as I've mentioned in a previous podcast, my life totally took a different turn. It looks nothing like what I thought it would look like, you know, for my plan for myself. And I'm kind of rebuilding and putting the pieces back together and reevaluating and kind of charting a new course, whatever. But I think that it's important to acknowledge where we actually are right now, because that's a painful reality to face, that things may not look like the way we wanted them to. But there's also a little bit of a blessing in that because it teaches you what you really do care about. When things are really not going well, it helps you see what really matters to you, which can give you even more motivation and refocus in a more powerful way. But I also try to mention too that just because it doesn't look like the way we want it to now doesn't necessarily mean that that goal that we're aiming for is unattainable. It just means we're approaching it from a different angle. You know, like that's what I always think about when you get thrown off course. It doesn't mean the goal is no longer reachable. It just means you're coming at it from a new angle.
Yeah.
Once you accept where you are now, you can actually work with what is available to you now to make progress towards the goal, even if you're coming at it from this way instead of the other way you thought you were going to come at it.
Yeah, I think also something that you mentioned really sparked this metaphor in me, but I feel like when you're in the dark, it's really easy to see the points of light.
Right.
And I think that's the direction we need to go. Just find those little light points in the dark and focus on that and put our attention into that to kind of feel like we still do have power.
Yeah, step one is face the facts, face reality, grieve what you thought it would be or wanted it to be, and it's not, right? That's step number one, because I think until you do that, you can't move forward. And then the next step is what you're talking about. Focus on what it is you can control and influence, right? And find the little ways that you can refocus that same passion you had towards these goals in a new way, or whatever feels attainable to you right now. And then I think the other thing is just from like a mental health and psychology standpoint, it's really good to reframe the meaning we're putting behind these events. You could look at the same scenario, the same reality, and make one meaning or one story out of it that could be catastrophic and really depressing and really heavy. But you could also look at the same details and the same facts and make a different meaning out of it that's more positive or that's more empowering. And there's so much power in reframing the way that you're making meaning about what happened in your life, in the election, in anything that feels like, what was the point of all this?
I think a lot of older generations say back in the days everything was better, but I don't think it necessarily was, but because they didn't have access to social media and all the world problems that were happening, they just were unaware, and that's why they feel like they were happier back then. And now we have access to everything going on in the world, from United States to China to Australia. It's so connected,
Which is like a really good thing and a really bad thing. Right?
Yes.
It's like, it's so overwhelming, but it also grants us the opportunity to really see things clearly and finally have an understanding of, oh my God, this is what's going on. We need to do something about it. And we need to have compassion for each other and talk about these things and feel connected. There is that sort of bliss of ignorance or whatever.
Yes.
But also they didn't have the opportunity to connect and realize what was going on in the world the way that we do now. So it's like, let's find the positive about the way that things are happening now.
Yeah.
Social media is a super powerful thing that we can use our voice and we can raise money for cause. There's so many things we can do with being able to reach so many people now.
Yeah, I think what you're saying is that it's really important to bring your attention back to what is going well. And I know if you look at the bigger layer, which is around us, the global layer, that feels like there's a lot of mess going on there right now. So it's good to bring it back to lower levels, your community, what is going well in your city. And if that still feels like a shit show, you can always bring it back to yourself, like your own family life and your friends. And if even that feels bad, just bring it back to yourself. What is going well within yourself right now, in your body, in your career, or in your home? Maybe you have a nice home that you really cherish. Just bring it back to where you feel comfortable and kind of find the joy. My mom actually always says that, find the joy when things feel heavy. So I really can resonate with what you're saying.
I want to be clear when I say stuff like this too, because I don't want anyone to think that I'm encouraging toxic positivity.
No.
It's so not healthy to ignore your own pain. Make sure you are acknowledging how you're really feeling. But for me, the way that I view hardship is not just stick your head in the sand and ignore the pain and just be la la land, But it's also taking what it is in front of you at the moment and being like, okay, so this thing happened. This is where things are right now. This is my reality. I think when you're at that point of facing reality, you can go down one path of really getting just so down and sucked down by that, right? But then there's also the other option of, okay, so what can I do with this? What do I have available to me now? What did I learn from this? What can I take away from this? What could this possibly be giving me or teaching me or showing me? Exactly. I think it's so much more empowering to think about a constructive positivity rather than drowning in the weight of it. That's the distinction I want to make. It's not like ignoring the bad and only focusing on the good or whatever, but it's like you're taking the whole situation and being like, all right, like I'm almost picturing like,
yes, I know what you mean.
let's say you just got shipwrecked and you just landed on this island and it's just like a bunch of random crap that you got dumped with, or like pieces of things that broke off, you could sit there and be like, oh my God, I'm screwed. I'm on this island. This is not where I was trying to get to this resort, and then my ship got wrecked or whatever, You could look at that situation and be like, this absolutely sucks. What is all this random junk in front of me now? Or you could be like, all right, so this hurricane happened and I got launched onto this island and I don't have my ship anymore. And what the heck am I doing? These are the facts. This is what's happening. Okay. And then it's like, okay, so now I've got all these random things. Could I build a raft? Could I make a smoke signal? Ways that just keep you able to training yourself to have the resilience in life to be like, what can I make of this? And how can I move forward from this place and still progress towards the same goals that I have, even if I got completely thrown off of what I originally thought, and there might be a blessing in there somewhere, right?
Yeah, but I definitely do agree with you. But at the same time, I also feel like we millennials are really tired. Like,
oh my God, 100%. Because of this podcast and because I'm a coach and my brain just goes there, I always try to find the constructive, positive thing to say.
Yes, I think it's good.
But I agree with you that it's like sometimes life is exhausting.
Yes.
But
then again, I try to find the spiritual aspects of it. And I feel like a lot of spiritual leaders say that we chose our lives before we came here.
Yeah.
So apparently I really want to learn about one crisis after another and what it does to the human body and how much it can possibly take.
Right? Oh my gosh. Yeah.
It's good. It makes us really wise.
Yeah. And actually, I don't know if this will help anybody, but something I came to terms with, because I feel like I had 10 or 15 years of just one thing after another. And just like, when is it going to be the positive stuff rolling in or whatever? And I kind of had this perspective shift where I thought to myself, okay, if I did have some sort of contract before I came in here, and if I imagine having a conversation with whoever is in charge and then being like, do you want to have all of your lessons spread out over the course of your whole life and every couple of years have a lesson to learn and take this long spread out less intense version? Or would you rather have a crash course and cram everything, all this intense stuff in a really short period of time and do all this crazy processing and then have learned all of those lessons and grown so much that the rest of your life, you have such a different perspective and you have learned all of these things?
Yeah, I think since you're saying yourself that you have these lessons really compressed, it almost feels like your life right now is a pressure cooker.
Right.
Just waiting to launch you into whatever you're supposed to do in this life,
That's the way that I would choose to look at it. If I had that choice, me as this human being in this time and space right now, I was the kind of person that I rushed through high school so I could graduate early. Like I went to summer school every single year so I could graduate as fast as possible and start my life. So that's my personality,
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I don't know if anybody out there will relate, and I'm sure you can relate as well. It's just, if I had the choice, you know what? It's good to learn these lessons and get to the point where I feel like I'm a much more well-rounded, healthy, like I have a better perspective on life, So
yeah, I think it's definitely a benefit to have a lot of life lessons young in your life when you're very young, because that way when you become a mom, if you want to become a mom, you can share a lot of the wise lessons you've learned with your children. I think for myself, I also prefer the pressure cooker over having trauma spread out throughout your life, because every time you start feeling like, okay, this is done, now it's exploded, and then bam, it's another lesson.
Right. I mean, to some extent, I feel like no matter what, we're still going to have lessons here and there. But yeah, if you had the choice, right, you prefer the pressure cooker. Yeah,
I think so.
To summarize everything we've chatted about and just give you some good takeaways, we're talking about always good to grieve and face the facts for whatever is happening. Give yourself the validation of whatever it is you're feeling so that you can regroup from where we are now, accept the way things are now, because that's the first step forward, right? You can't do anything until you're in the present, right? And then make the best meaning out of it that you can. Find whatever reframe or perspective you can take on it or draw meaning from it in a way that feels empowering instead of disempowering. And then I think also a lot of what this type of event in the world can teach us is what our values are. Like we were talking about before, if you go through really hard things, it kind of shows you what you really care about. So that
Yes.
in and of itself can be a blessing of now I know what I'm really passionate about. And now I have a direction and a sense of purpose of move forward. And then refocusing towards your goals from the new trajectory, really.
Yeah.
You can still work towards your goals. Even if there's a huge setback or it doesn't look like the way that you wanted to, you can still take steps towards whatever it is that you care about. And like you were saying as well, reconnecting to your joy. So whatever brings you a sense of purpose and meaning, especially whatever the deeper reason was that you were passionate about this thing in the first place, whether it was a relationship or the election or a job. If you're feeling disappointed about how things happened with the election, maybe the reason why you are disappointed is because you care so much about making the world a better place. So if that's your deeper reason why that was so meaningful to you, apply that in another way. I'm going to help with my community. I'm going to volunteer for the same causes that I was caring about before, but maybe on a smaller scale. Or if it's climate change or something, what can you do in your own daily life that you have control over? You worry about your own footprint, right? What you can control. And then if it's a relationship or something and you were disappointed that a relationship didn't work out, well, the reason you were disappointed is because you really want to find, let's say in the scenario, a long-term partner that you really care about. You can still work towards that goal, right? Same thing with like you lost a job that you really wanted or something. Some of the really hard things, if you lose a loved one, the reason that means something to you is because you valued that connection so much. The reason it's so painful is because there's so much love there, right? So I have the capacity to love so much, and I'm just going to redirect that passion that I have, like craving that I have to have those things in my life and further invest into the relationships that I do still have. And I think really think about why something was so meaningful to you and use that as your guiding post, your compass of how to reorient towards that goal. That goal is still attainable, right?
Yeah. So for our listeners, it might be really interesting after this podcast to ask yourself, why was this meaningful to me? And then also ask yourself, what is one small action that I can take today to do either for myself to feel better or to make a change towards a better world and a world I desire to see? I think that would be really nice if you want to share that with us in the comments, because I would love to read through what everybody is thinking right now and what everybody's doing to make positive change. Let's just inspire each other.
I think that'll be a great way for people to feel empowered and connected.
Yeah. Thank you so much for listening, and speak to you next week.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for tuning in. Would you like us to talk about a specific topic in our podcast? Make sure to comment and we'll keep it in mind for the future.
And if you enjoy what we're doing here, we'd love for you to like and share this episode so that our podcast reaches other HSPs who can enjoy it as well.
While you're already here, don't forget to check out our additional resources for HSPs and empaths.
And Catherine has her own blog site and has created an online membership for HSPs and empaths with featured experts on relevant personal growth topics every month.
And Tiara has her own YouTube channel and has also built a step-by-step online program for HSPs on the journey to thriving in their health, relationships, and career.
All of our links are in the description. See you in the next episode.
Sorry, just cut that out.